You're listening to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast, episode 225. Welcome to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. I'm your host, Paula Price, lawyer turned certified executive coach. This podcast was created to empower women lawyers just like you to create a life and practice you love. Join me every week for a break from the hustle so we can focus on you, what you truly want, and how you can create it. If you're over the overwhelm, done with putting out fires, and ready to redefine success on your own terms, you're in the right place. Ready for today's episode? Let's dive in. Hello, my dear friend, and welcome back to the podcast. This is an episode all about decluttering, the dread of dealing with the chaos of physical spaces, whether physical spaces are your office space, your children's bedroom, the kitchen, the living area, wherever it is in your surrounding spaces that clutter has accumulated, and you look at it and you see it and you know you need to deal with it, but you don't want to. Can you relate? How does it feel when you look around your spaces and see that there are things out of place, outdated things, broken things, things that maybe your children have left on the counter, and you know you want to put it away because you love to see what the counters look like. You've maybe even forgotten what color the counters are, but there's this part of you that just doesn't want to do it. Now, yes, I am going on a little bit of a theme here in terms of the podcast episode topics. If you tuned in last week, I talked about being an efficiency enthusiast, and this week I am talking about decluttering. And I think these topics are probably relevant to your work life in the sense that if you've got an office that you'd like to organize, you can apply these same principles to your physical working space. But I find this is probably more significant at least for me, in my personal life, in my home. I have mentioned many times, I've got a family of 4. We are all under a single roof. We have 4 souls, 4 different approaches to organization. And with the return to school, that is the season that I'm in currently, I have found that I'm turning my mind to wrapping up the summer, getting organized for the fall. It gets busier for me. The kids get back into their routines. And so over the long weekend, which we just had, I spent a couple of days cleaning my children's bedrooms. So I've got 2 kids, 2 bedrooms, and I spent a lot of time decluttering. And so I thought I would share with you some of the strategies that I use that help me to get the job done, stay focused, and stay sane and reasonably happy, and overcoming that off-putting sense of, oh, I don't want to do this. I mean, some people maybe get really excited about cleaning. I get excited by the results. I don't totally get excited by the process. So that's what I have in store for you today. I'm offering 3 strategies, 3 sort of foundational strategies that are very practical, very applicable, that you can use to address any physical spaces that you would like to declutter. Now, before I dive in, I would love to just say hello, check in, offer an update. Last time I connected with you, we were just about to embark on an overnight trip to Chilliwack. It was our last family vacation before the school year started. And I wanted to report that it was a total success. For those of you who are like our family and the long vacations, the idea of backpacking as a family for 6 weeks through Europe is a non-starter. A shorter vacation can sometimes be perfect. It was a 2-hour car ride. We stayed at the hotel. The slide that I mentioned last week was perfect. The kids loved it. We went to the theme park. We went to Walmart. We did all these things as a family. And what I loved about our vacation was that it was super low key. We all had fun together. We had lots of time to chit chat and connect, which to me is the most important thing at this stage. My kids are now 13. My son is now a teenager. Over the weekend, I became the parent of a teenager. And as of yesterday, I now have a child in high school. This is a pretty big milestone for a parent. And for any of you who are either parents of teenagers who are in high school or you're getting close, you know what I mean. It's a big shift. there's a big shift between your first day of kindergarten and your first day of high school. And so that's a big milestone. I'm excited about it. My daughter too, she's growing up. She's now in elementary school on her own, which is a shift for her. Big brother has kind of moved on to another school. And so this is a new chapter for her as well. So that's very exciting. My husband and I celebrated our 14-year wedding anniversary yesterday. We kept it pretty low key. There's a lot that goes on. We got married on the Friday of Labor Day long weekend, way back when. And so that weekend, as you can imagine, has a lot. It's that long weekend before school starts. It's around my son's birthday. It's around that transition back to the school year. And so we're going to probably do something like have a celebratory dinner or date or something like that in a few weeks' time when things have settled down a little bit. But what we did do yesterday, which was really nice, is we had this lovely family dinner. So again, I really appreciate that my kids are kind of getting to that stage now where they're gaining more independence, and I can see how things are going to shift. You know, our family being always together versus the kids going off and doing a lot more on their own. So I am relishing in those moments. And so I'm very proud and happy and grateful for all that we have built over the past 14 years. And it's a lot. It's a lot. If you've got the kids and the family and all that at home, you know what I'm talking about. And one final thing I would love to clarify. In last week's episode, I talked about throwing shade, and I actually don't remember the context exactly. And then I attributed it to my children. I said, I don't really know what this means. I think I've heard my kids say it. And so on our road trip to Chilliwack, I mentioned this to my kids. I said, hey kids, I recorded a podcast episode this morning, and I mentioned this expression, throwing shade. Like, what does that actually mean? And then they said, we don't even know what it means. We never use that. And so I'm just correcting that part of last week's episode. They apparently do not use this expression, so I must have heard it from somewhere else. And I just looked it up before hitting the record button. And in the slang urban dictionary, it talks about throwing shade as being this subtle way of showing contempt or disrespect for someone. And it may be publicly doing that. So there's a few definitions. That's roughly what it means. I don't think I used it correctly, not surprising. And so if you were wondering about that, there you go. That's the answer. And my children have disclaimed any connection to that expression. So there you go. Now, with that, let's dive into clutter, physical spaces, chaos, what to do. And the reason this happens, at least as far as I can tell, and this is how it happens for me, is getting busy and life happening, and things slowly start to accumulate and pile up until the point where you get a really cluttered situation. Now, when it comes to clutter, I am going to really address it in these sort of three major phases. So I'm going to dive into that first one, which is to identify a what by when. Now, the reason this is important is that when you're dealing with clutter, you might have a very small cluttered space, like a kitchen drawer. That's probably a 30-minute project max. You can also end up with much larger physical spaces, like a bedroom or an office. Now, over the weekend, I dealt with 2 bedrooms, and that felt like a lot, especially one of the rooms had more stuff in it than the other room. So that project was a 2-day project. The other bedroom was a 1-day project. And so you want to think about your what by when, and think about it in terms of the results that you're trying to create and the time that it's going to take and when you want it done by. So what by when is kind of a shorthand for that. And so that's really your first step. If you're thinking about decluttering a physical space, you want to identify the space and focus on the what first. Now, the what is it you're trying to create? If you're looking at a drawer, for example, you might think, okay, I want that drawer to be free of anything that I'm not immediately using. If you're a person that has a desk, for example, a working desk in your office, and you've got that top drawer that you normally stick sticky notes in, or pens, or notepads, or whatever, a stapler, then you might think about, okay, what are the essentials that I want to have in that drawer? What's the result that I'm seeking? If it's a bigger project, like a bedroom, you might be thinking of, okay, I want the closet to be emptied of any, in the case of a child who grows, I want to remove all the clothes that no longer fit. I want to have 2 bags, one for donation, one for garbage. I want to take all the toys and decide which toys are staying and which toys are leaving. I want to take all the activity-related items. So, for example, if your child is into art, all the art supplies, or sewing, all the sewing supplies. If they're into gaming, all the gaming equipment. So you want to think about what categories you have and what results you're seeking. So you want them to all be organized. You want the surfaces to be clean and organized. You want any junk to be removed. You want the floors to be wiped and vacuumed. Again, it's going to depend on your space, but what I think is really key when you're going after a big decluttering project is to be really clear and specific about the outcome that you are seeking and to create a very specific list of the things you want to do. So, for example, if you think about cleaning a bedroom and you put clean room on your to-do list, that's really vague. It's really hard to know exactly what you want to do. So you want to be specific. And I just listed a whole bunch of different items that you might have on your list. Floors swept, bed made, drawers decluttered, and you want to list that out item by item because that gives you a roadmap and it also breaks down the task into smaller pieces. So you want to be really, really specific and you want to know the result at the end, which is a tidy room with organized spaces, everything in its place, all the junk removed, anything that goes to storage, anything for donation goes to donation. So you've got a clear plan. Again, if you're dealing with a bedroom or you're dealing with an office space, if you've got a large office space and the papers have all piled up, I need to deal with my office space. I'm hoping to do that this week, fingers crossed. Again, one of the reasons that we get into these situations with messy or disorganized spaces is usually time. Sometimes these projects can take a lot of time. I'm going to speak about that in a second, but you need the time. And so you want to be specific about what you're going to be doing in your office. Organizing files, you're going to be discarding any papers you're not using, sending files off to storage. You may be, dealing with, I'm really talking about physical clutter today, but maybe there's electronic clutter. So you might want to be organizing your inbox better or your folders on your computer, etc. So that what by when, the first thing you want is the what. What are you trying to accomplish? And the more clear and specific you can be about that, just like with any goal, the easier it is to then execute. And if you're dreading a task, which if I'm decluttering, typically I'm not skipping in there with rainbows and daisies, singing a song, thinking I can't wait to declutter all day. It's usually like, the time has come. I've chosen to deal with this. Let's get started. So you might think about how you make that easy for yourself, and a roadmap is one of the ways to do that. Clear, specific outcomes, your what. And then we want to think about your when. Now, the by when is shorthand. What by when is kind of a shorthand for goal setting. It's pretty good, but what I would invite you to think about is yes, by when, right? What is your deadline that you're setting for yourself for having the thing done? So for me, it was, by the end of this weekend, I would like to have these 2 bedrooms neat and organized. I'd like to have everything out of the house that I can remove from the house. I'd like to have all the floors really clean. I want to get in and vacuum out all of the corners and under the bed and behind the dressers and all that. It was a full, thorough, complete cleanse really of the bedrooms because I wanted my kids to have a fresh start and feel good starting out the school year. So that was the goal, end of the weekend. And for you, you might think about when is the timeline that you want this done. And then you want to think about the actual execution of the work and when you are going to do it. Now, this is the hard part, and the reason why I think we end up with clutter in the first place is that it's really hard to prioritize. You've got your day-to-day things that you absolutely must do. So you've got your work, you've got your maintenance. If you're like me and you're cooking and cleaning up after your family, you've got that every day. You can allocate at least a few hours for that. And so the luxuries, if you will, of having a super tidy space may not factor into your day-to-day. By the time you get to that decluttering process for a bedroom, this is not something that you can necessarily do in 15-minute increments a little bit at a time. It may be something that you have to dedicate a day to. So you will have to decide for yourself what strategy works best for you. I find with a decluttering project, if it is a kitchen drawer, yes, I can probably do that in a few minutes. If it is something large, like an office space, like a bedroom, then it needs more time. If it's the garage, I mentioned the garage the other week, I am going to have to set a day aside, probably sometime in October, to deal with the contents of the garage. And much like work projects, I sometimes talk to lawyers who have trouble setting aside the time for deep thinking projects. If you're looking to transition from one job to another, I had one lawyer tell me, and I absolutely love this, I want to do it, but I kind of want to focus on it in the times that I'm not already busy, kind of like in that free time that doesn't actually exist. And the trouble with that approach, of course, is that if you are saving tasks for that extra time that you have, that free time, the drips and drabs at the end of the day, it just isn't going to get done. And so if it's a big decluttering project, then my approach and what you might consider is setting aside a full day of uninterrupted time where you get to focus exclusively on the project itself. Now, if you're like me, that probably means that you're going to ask your partner or someone to help you with all the other things that would be happening that day. So maybe they take the kids out to do something fun so that you don't need to worry about meal planning or cleaning up the kitchen, because an hour of cleaning up the kitchen after lunch is not going to be as valuable to you as an hour of accumulating a garbage bag full of things that you can then donate or throw away that are currently occupying space. So we want you to allocate the time that you need, and that may be allocating a full day if it's a big project. And there's also this idea of doing things in short bursts of time. So I am a big fan of using shorter increments to get things done. So if you think, okay, well, Paula, what you're suggesting sounds really nice, but the chances of me getting a full day anytime in the next 6 months is completely unrealistic, then yes, absolutely work with what you have. Do the 15-minute increments. That is absolutely better than not doing it at all. And over time, you will make progress. But what I have found for myself is that with projects that are really big, I love having that dedicated time. I love giving it a full day. I can really sink my teeth into it. I get into the right headspace. And by the end of the day, I then have the satisfaction of the result. And I find once I get going in the project, I don't want to stop until it's done. And so I like that approach for bigger projects. But again, you need to kind of approach it in the way that works best for you. So that is tip number 1. Is we want your what by when. So that's your structure for the project, and going back, what you want to accomplish, that list of things, whether it's notional or on paper. I recommend putting it on paper. And also, when is it going to be done by? And more importantly, when are you going to do it? When are you giving yourself, what time are you giving yourself to focus exclusively on that project? So that is number 1. Now, the second strategy that I am offering today is mindset. Now, this is huge. This is really huge, especially when the idea of doing something like decluttering isn't exactly like, let's go to Disneyland, or let's go to the movies, or let's go to that really great restaurant you've been wanting to try. This typically is not a chore that people are dying to do. Some people, maybe. I love organizing. I love being organized. I do not love the process of sifting through all sorts of items, whether it's office paper, pens, or files, or clothing, or toys, or any of that kind of stuff. When you're dealing with physical spaces too, sometimes it's dusty. I do not like dust. I feel kind of unwell when I'm in really dusty spaces. I don't like getting out the vacuum cleaner, but I do it because I love the result and it needs to be done. So chances are, if there are areas of your physical spaces that are looking a little bit cluttered, chances are it's not something that you're super eager to do. So we want to focus on your mindset and how you can start to think about the task to make that task more appealing. So we're going to start with a few reframes, right? If your current thinking is, this is going to take forever. This is a waste of time. Why do I have to do this? I don't want to do this. This is going to be uncomfortable. I don't want to make all these decisions. It's not my mess. Why should I clean it up? Oh, I don't even know how I got here. Whatever is going through your mind. These are the thoughts that I have when it comes to decluttering, at least some of them. So we want to find other things that we can think so that we can kind of push out all those negative thoughts and pull in some more inspiring thoughts. Now, if you listen to the podcast on the regular, then you know I'm a big fan of mindfulness, thinking about what we're thinking about, and then being intentional about how we're choosing to perceive a situation, the story that we are telling ourselves, the narrative. So the narrative here may be influenced by some of the suggestions I'm going to offer. So I have 3 reframes to offer you. Number 1 is that this is an investment. If you're thinking, oh, this is a waste of time, I could be outside, it's a beautiful day, I could be doing something a lot more fun. Why is everybody else going to the park and I am in this dusty room trying to sort through Lego pieces and find the missing shoe for this doll costume? Well, the reason that you're doing it is because it's an investment of time. The time that you spend getting that room organized is something that you will enjoy for days, if not weeks to come, maybe months if you're lucky. And I saw this beautiful poster when I was on vacation in Paris. I mentioned that my daughter and I took this trip and there were a number of life lessons. And one of them came from seeing a picture of the Eiffel Tower in 3 stages of being built. And what was really cool about that poster is the first stage had the base already established. And then the second 2 posters were kind of the second tier and then the third and final tier. And then the dates were underneath each stage. And what was so interesting was that from the first stage, now granted the foundation was there, to the last one was about a year. And when you think about a year being invested to create the Eiffel Tower, relative to how much joy and inspiration and history and symbolism, all that has emanated from that initial investment, you can see how that initial investment has been absolutely just overtaken by the benefit of that initial investment. So here's a place where you might think about, okay, I'm investing this time, I'm investing this day, and as a result, I'm going to enjoy so many benefits, right? I'm going to step into that room, it's going to feel organized, it's going to be easier to keep organized. So that's one thing, is to think about your time as an investment as opposed to a waste of time. The second reframe I'm going to offer you is gratitude. Now, gratitude is one of those emotions. If you start listening to any podcasts or reading books about mindfulness and emotions and vibrations, and maybe it gets a little bit out of your norm, your usual materials that you read or not, depending, people talk about vibes, vibrations and frequencies of the emotional range that you have. And so low vibration frequencies tend to be things like hate and anger and frustration and stress and anxiety. And then your more high vibe states, and I'm putting this in very colloquial terms, your more high vibe states would be things like love and gratitude in particular. And one podcast I listened to recently, I can't remember which one, was talking about how cultivating gratitude is a really effective way of feeling better. And it pushes out those more negative emotions because you can't be feeling grateful and angry at the same time. It's not really doable. So when you're approaching your task and when you're in the task, sometimes it helps to try to channel gratitude. Not easy. You're sitting there and there's a dusty pile of toys and you're like, why do I have to go through all these toys? Why do I have to go through all these books? Why do I have to sweep the floor? Why do I have to vacuum in the corner? Oh, there's a spider. Gross. The reason we want to channel gratitude is because it's going to make the task so much easier and hopefully improve your mindset. So how do you do that? Things like, I'm so grateful that I have other people in my life and I get to have them in my life. And part of that is to sometimes clean up things that they have created that maybe I didn't create myself. Gratitude that you have the resources to buy the toys in the first place, even if you're not using them. Gratitude that you are washing dishes, even though maybe washing dishes isn't your favorite thing. It's reflective of the fact that you have dishes, you had food, that you maybe had the joy of eating it on your own or in the company of your loved ones. So anytime you can find a spark of gratitude, it shifts your focus. You're no longer thinking about how annoyed you are that you're washing the dishes or picking socks up off the floor. You're feeling gratitude for the person, the things that really you value that are associated with that thing. So that's reframe number 2, is to find the gratitude. And then finally, reframe number 3 is more of a transformational one. And this is kind of fun from a personal development perspective on the professional front. And also just, if you've got kids too, it's also a neat shift. So, for example, when my daughter and I were in her room and I was helping her sort through some of her toys, and one of the things that she commented on was that there were toys that were really great for her at one stage of her life, and we put a lot of those in storage or donated them. And then when we were almost done with her room, she said, this feels a lot like who I am now versus who I was when I was younger, or something along those lines. And that is exactly the shift that I like to channel or focus on when doing a decluttering project. It's thinking about the future you, the future life that you want to have, and how you can align your physical spaces to match that. So my daughter probably isn't thinking about who she wants to be as a grade 6 student, but when I'm thinking about my office papers, I'm thinking about where do I want my practice to go? What are the papers I want to have on display? What's most important? What do I want to focus on and emphasize? And what do I want to let go? What is a reflection of who I was, the professional work that I used to do, possibly, and can I let that go? So for you, you might be thinking about how can you basically alter your physical surroundings or elevate your physical surroundings to be a reflection of who you are now versus who you were maybe even 6 months ago. And also, where are you going? So that might look different depending on what it is that you are organizing, which physical space, whether it's an office space or a space in your home, and what direction you see yourself going in. So that's your third reframe. So again, just getting to that mindset piece, that dealing with the dread and maybe frustration and maybe even resentment over dealing with the physical clutter is to look at your mindset, and you can reframe the way that you think based on this is an investment. This is, I'm grateful for this because, and then finally, how is this a reflection of who you're becoming versus who you have been in the past? Now, a few other ideas in terms of mindset. We want to expect to be exhausted. Dealing with physical clutter, much like mental clutter, is a decision-making process. So you may have heard the expression that physical clutter is evidence of unmade decisions. And I heard that once, and I forever have that etched in my mind because I think it's so true. Look around at the clutter that you see. Chances are there's an underlying decision that has yet to be made. What that means is that decluttering a physical space is going to require a large number of decisions made by you, sometimes in conjunction with somebody else. With my kids, I had some consultations with them along the way in terms of what are we keeping, what are we not keeping. My daughter, bless her, she had a lot of toys to sort through, and so we sat together and we went through that process together. That was really helpful. Now, I also mentioned recently that a friend of mine recommended a book called The Organized Mind, and I've since done a little bit of research. I haven't actually bought the book, but I've identified the author as Daniel Levitin. He is a neuroscientist out of McGill University in Canada, and he has a Google Talk. So I started listening to his Google Talk, I guess after I'd done my decluttering, I was folding laundry, and listening to what he had to say. And one of the things that he talked about was decision-making and how it burns energy in the brain, glucose in particular. And what he said that I thought was so interesting was that big decisions and little decisions burn the same amount of energy. So whether you're deciding what to have for lunch, or how to deal with your retirement savings plans, you are using the same energy. Your brain is using the same energy. So what that means is that after a number of decisions, your brain becomes depleted and you get slower, less productive, less able to make decisions, and you need to then recharge your brain. And one of the things he mentioned was sleep that recharges your brain. There may be other things that you can do to recharge. For the purposes of today's episode, I simply want to have you set the expectation that it's going to be fatiguing on your brain. Now, when I declutter, I typically do not listen to podcasts or even music these days. If I'm doing a house task, I love having something in my ear, a voice to listen to keep me entertained. So if I'm folding laundry or unloading the dishwasher, I'm more than happy to listen to someone's voice, listen to something interesting. I find it helps to keep me on task, and it's entertaining for me, and I love learning. But when it comes to making decisions, so I'm actively cleaning and having to make choices about something, that's when I don't want to have a voice in my ear. I actually strictly want to focus on the task at hand because I know it's going to deplete my mental resources. It also means that I'm going to strategize the cleaning process to put the more rote tasks. Like cleaning to me is not a decision. It's just an execution of something you already know how to do. It doesn't take brain power for me to run a vacuum. It does take brain power for me to decide if we're keeping the Barbie or putting her in a box. It does take a decision over whether I want to continue to do a certain type of work in my business, or do I want to put that file away for now. So you want to be thinking about how much brain power you're going to need, how many decisions you're going to be making, what's most important in the decluttering tasks, and stack that up first while you still have that really fresh brain, and you can expect to be exhausted. So I mentioned as well, like by the end of the day, you're going to have a pretty tired brain. What I've also noticed is that if I do a cleaning project over several days, the first day is the best day. And then the next day and the next day, I get worse and worse. I get tired and it's harder for me to execute. So you might have the same experience. Maybe you're more mentally agile than me. Maybe you have a greater capacity to make decisions, in which case you may not have that problem. But for me, I really noticed that from one day to the next, I had less enthusiasm and energy for the tasks. So expect that you're going to be tired because you're making a lot of decisions and your brain is going to feel that. Okay. That is the second thing I wanted to say about mindset. And then finally, this is probably something that maybe ties back to the investment, but you want to focus on how good you're going to feel afterwards, right? In the moment, you might be like, oh, this is so painful. And sometimes it's hard to see the progress that you're making, but you are going to feel so much better afterwards. So if you can really focus on feeling good when you're done, that may help you to pick up that next stray item off the floor or whatever it is that you need. So we've covered two major strategies then. Number one being that what by when. Number two being that mindset work. And the mindset, I think, is so important because that really is going to get you aligned mentally with the physical labor that is then required to implement the execution of the decluttering process. So my final strategy really is the execution and the how. And here, I think the best advice that I can give, or the best suggestion, is to use all of the hacks that work for you. In the execution of the how, all the hacks that work for you. I talk to lawyers all of the time about different hacks because I find different lawyers, different humans are wired differently. And so one hack will work really well for somebody, but it won't work very well for somebody else. So this is a really good time to think about the list of hacks that you already use that work for you, whether it's list writing or scheduling or giving yourself a reward or taking breaks or whatever it is. Everybody's going to have different things that appeal to them. Maybe it's having a friend handy. Sometimes I don't do this so much anymore, but I used to, if I had a really painful task ahead of me, I have a good friend. I would say, listen, I'm about to do this thing. I don't want to do it, but I'm going to do it anyways. And so that accountability was kind of a hack, right? That got me motivated, committing to somebody else. So think about all the hacks that work for you that help you get a job done. So I'm going to offer a few of my favorite hacks. And as I do that, I encourage you to think about what your favorite hacks are. So I mentioned already, lists are probably my favorite and most effective go-to hack, because what that does is it takes things from my brain where they're all swirling around and they have no particular order and, I can't pin them down, to a list. And for me, I prefer a handwritten list. I will use electronic lists for large projects where it's just impractical for me to try to write it all down and reorganize it. But what I find is that when I write down a list, I really connect with the task. I can see it. It feels more tangible. I like to make my lists look nice. I like my handwriting to be neat. I will use different colors, whatever it takes just to have a roadmap for myself that then guides me. So for a room or for an office, I will list out all the different things that I want to accomplish, right? What are the goals? And then they're all on that list. And then I can check them off as I go through. Sometimes I have that list handy. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes the list is somewhere else altogether. It's in a different room, but I can go back to it when I need to see what else needs to be done. If I'm crossing things off as I go, or even at the end of the day, I get the satisfaction of seeing, great, okay, I told myself I would do all these things and look, they are all done, except maybe these one or two things. So lists can be really effective. If lists work for you, make lists. Make all the lists that you need. They are going to help you stay on track. Now, there's also the pizza method. And the pizza method is really a task initiation strategy that I offer to clients, usually for professional work. That memo you don't want to write, or the conversation that you don't want to have, or the project that feels overwhelming. The pizza method is really just pizza because I think it's nice to have a way to remember things. And the method involves two aspects that you might find on a pizza: tomato and salami. So tomato is because of the Pomodoro method, which you've probably already heard of. It is a way of chunking up your task through time. And the reason it's called Pomodoro is that Pomodoro is Italian for tomato. And the Pomodoro method actually doesn't have anything to do with tomatoes. It has to do with the timer. And the timer goes on for however many minutes feel right to you. And the purpose of that Pomodoro, the purpose of setting the timer, is simply to initiate the task. So you can set it for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour. Usually you want to set it for a relatively short period of time, because the purpose of that is really mostly to get you started and then staying on task for a certain amount of time. So going back to the pizza method and the Pomodoro is you want to set a timer for a certain amount of time and just do anything. You just want to do something that is furthering that task. You're picking up something off the floor, you're taking a stack of paper on your desk and you're identifying what's in that pile. You're going to a file folder and opening it up. You are opening a drawer and removing the contents, whatever it takes. You just want to do something for that time you've set using your timer. The second part of a pizza method is the salami method, and that's really just taking the task itself. So if you think about it in two different frames, one is the time. Okay, I'm going to chunk time and then execute based on that. The other is chunking the project. So the salami method is imagining like a tube of salami and how you'd slice that up. And so you end up with these trenches. So you want to do that, but for tasks, right? If you've got a big project and it's multi-step, you want to set out what those different steps are. And those are like your salami slices. And when it comes to execution, pick one. Pick one aspect, one slice of that salami. And when it comes to picking, you can do it based on what's easiest. You can do it based on what's hardest. You can do it based on which thing, if I do it, will be the most effective use of the time or the execution of a single task. You can do it based on what you feel like doing. It doesn't matter. As far as I'm concerned, if you get yourself started, then you're already in the task, and it's a lot easier to stay in the task once you're already in it. Now, here's where I'm also going to mention breaks. When I have a large task ahead of me, especially a cleaning task like this, I typically take very few breaks and very short breaks because I find breaks take up a lot of time, right? I don't want to have a 2-hour lunch break in the middle of a cleaning task because I may find it really hard to get back into the task and it pushes back the finish time. If I'm doing this in a day, I actually want it done sooner in the day so that I can sit down and relax than later in the day. So I'm not going to take a long break. You might. It might be helpful for you to do that. For me, I am going to have short breaks and I'm going to stay on task as much as possible because I want to see the result done quickly. So again, you can do breaks however that feels better to you. And then finally, the last strategy that I offer here. So in the how-to, what are all the hacks? Figure out what works best for you. And that also includes getting help. And depending on the nature of the task, it might be hard to find the right person to help you. So if you're organizing your office space, for example, maybe having your assistant handy or helping you with elements of that might be really helpful. If it's a task in a bedroom for one of your children, getting them involved in some of the decision making, that could be helpful. If it's a general tidying of the house, you might turn to your partner and say, okay, can you do these things? I'm going to do those things. If you can delegate it out to someone you hire professionally, that's great. I find this kind of thing is harder to delegate to somebody because these are personal decisions. Whether or not you keep your daughter's Barbie is more personal than, hey, can you go scrub the sinks and vacuum the floor. So anyways, but get help where you can. So that's it, my dear friend. That is what I have to offer in terms of strategy. So again, think about those spaces that you want to tackle. Think about maybe the dread that you're feeling. And now you can go at those tasks by number one, thinking about what you want to accomplish. What are the results that you're trying to create? And when are you going to do them? When will they be done by? You want to think about your mindset. So how can you reframe the task to feel a little bit more excited about it? Seeing it as an investment of your time, thinking about all the ways that you're grateful that you've got files to work on, that you've got clients that want to work with you, that you've got really interesting projects that you get to work on, that you've got a space to do your work in. Channel all the gratitude that you can. And then finally, how is your end result going to align with who you're becoming, the future you versus the you of the past, that organized version of you that has everything handy? That is where we're headed. We also want to be thinking about, again, we're going back to that mindset, the expectation of it will be exhausting, right? You're making a lot of decisions. And so it's normal to feel a bit tired at the end of that. And then finally, really focusing on that after is going to feel so satisfying. And then the third global strategy is just all the hacks. What works for you? I've offered a few strategies that work for me. So think about what works for you. Now, I also wanted to mention just a few additional footnotes to organization of physical space. These are things that I find helpful, useful tips and strategies that are a little bit more maybe discreet. So one of them, and this is a tip that I learned from my friend Mylène Morancy. She's a professional organizer. She's been on the podcast before to talk about physical workspaces and hybrid workspaces. And this tip that she gave me was really useful for organizing my office space. And that was to have zones of heat or usage, right? The things that you use most frequently should be ready to hand. They should be close to you versus things that you only use once in a blue moon. Those can go at a greater distance or even into storage. So as you're organizing your physical spaces, whether it's your workspace, whether it's your bedroom, whether it's your child's bedroom, whether it's the kitchen, whether it's a living space, think about the things that you use regularly, that you touch regularly. And you want those to be easier to access if you want them to be easier to access. If you think about a habit you're trying to break, maybe you don't want to watch as much TV. So maybe you take the remote and you put it in a closet somewhere so that you actually have to go and physically move over to find it or whatever it is. So you want to be thinking about making the things that you want handy close to you. So that is one way to think about it, and to put things that go into storage further away from you. So I find that really useful in terms of deciding where things go. Another tip, again, one that I learned from Mylène, was not to do the storage boxes and containers right away, right? Not to go out and buy a bunch of new storage containers and just take all your stuff and then put it into new storage. You want to go through the process of decluttering and sorting and identifying what you're keeping before you start storing things, because you don't really want to be just, accumulating more clutter and stuffing it into boxes or bags or whatever. One thing that I used just this weekend that I've never used before are those plastic bags that you can get the air out of them. You can use a vacuum to do that. I used it for a bag of stuffies and it was quite incredible. I didn't use a vacuum. I actually just sat on the bag of stuffies and all the air went out of the bag and it shrank the bag by about 50%, which was quite a big volume. So that will work for things like stuffies or clothing, not so much for your files, but I thought that was great. I bought it at the dollar store. Well, I bought several of them in the end at the dollar store. So that's kind of a neat little tip. And then finally, as you're going through the process of actually decluttering, you want to have filters. Like, what are you going to ask yourself in order to make decisions about the things that you keep or let go? So if you have ever heard of Marie Kondo, which you probably have, she talks about, does it spark joy? That's a filter that she uses for deciding whether or not to keep something. Now, I can tell you there are a lot of things in my life that do not spark joy, but I'm not parting with them for whatever reason. So another filter you might think about is, do I love it? Do I use it? Do I have space for it? And if the answer to those questions is yes, then you keep it. If the answer is no, then you might seriously consider what you want to do with that object. So for example, if you have, something that you use once every 2 years, is it an item that you want to keep with you? Maybe it's a tool that you use to screw something in, or an Allen key that goes with your IKEA furniture. Is it a large Tupperware container that you use once in a blue moon? I had a giant vase that I had for years. It was huge. And then I finally decided, I just don't get flowers that are big enough. And of course, yesterday my husband gave me these gorgeous sunflowers. I'm like, oh, that tall vase would have come in handy, but it's so rare. Do I really want to occupy, I kept it in the closet and it was huge. I don't. Think about what objects you have that maybe you just don't use them very often. If you needed one, you could borrow one or buy a fresh one. So the idea here is really to be thinking about what can you remove from your life. Spark joy might not be the standard that you can or want to adhere to, but what filters are relevant for you. So I've offered 3 ideas. Do you love it? Do you use it? Do you have space for it? Those are ones I've heard before, but you come up with your own filters based on what works best for you. So hopefully I've helped you to get a plan in action, to have some tools to overcome the dread. Hopefully you've identified a room or two that you would like to declutter. For me, next up on my list is my office space. I'd also like to explore our living areas, the kitchen and the living room. I find I need to do these tasks once every few months. Once every few months, I need to dedicate a proper amount of time. Yes, it's really great if you can keep these areas clutter-free as you go. And that is one of the benefits of decluttering, is that it's a lot easier to keep a space clean once you've done that whole project of decluttering. But the reality is you're busy, you've got other things going on, you've got other things that you need to do day to day. So when the clutter piles up, this is a way to approach it. You've got your plan, you set aside a day, and then you enjoy the fruits of your labor. So with that, I'm going to wish you a very, very happy back to school season, a very back to work, back to the swing of things. This episode is going to come out early September. So by then, my kids are going to be fully into school. They have their first full day today. So I'm excited to hear how that goes. Yesterday was just an hour for my daughter, an hour and a half for my son. Everything seemed to go pretty smoothly. So fingers crossed that I hear good reports today. Same for you, and I hope you have a decluttered and enjoyable fall. Thanks again for joining me. It's been such a treat to connect with you. I will look forward to reconnecting with you again next week. Bye for now. If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to miss an episode, subscribe and follow the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you haven't already, please leave a rating and review. Your feedback will help me create a podcast that's tailored to your needs and goes straight to the heart of what matters to you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. If you want more information, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com. See you next week.